And I'm joined on stage now by Merritt, Amanda, and Derek, who you've seen throughout the day today, and we're going to take some questions from the audience. So one of the first questions we saw pretty early on was, what are some strategies you recommend to manage pushback from finance when forecasted budgets go over the initial value for cloud migration? I think it's really important that we make sure they understand the kind of the holistic picture. We heard some of our team talk earlier about the fact that there may be a good reason for that. We've migrated sooner, we've done something faster or better. There may be a way where we are actually delivering more value for those dollars that are spent. And I think FinOps is really a great way to enable being able to demonstrate that and be able to make sure we're articulating that value quickly and easily. So I think that's one of the real benefits of implementing FinOps here. Merritt, I saw we've got a question here about how do we know what efficient policies to put in place for net new cloud implementations? Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, so I know John had responded in our live comments talking about IAM access, principles of least privilege. Those are all great. But think about your overall governance process, your ServiceNow, your Jira, your Cloud Center of Excellence, your change review board, whatever you call it, because you want to put in those policies that add a cost lens, but not necessarily a whole brand new policy, right? You have an existing governance for your on-prem or your existing cloud. And if you're trying to add FinOps to it, just, hey, before this can get approved, you have to tell us how much it's going to cost and what validation process you went in. Even those simple steps can really help drive some accountability from that beginning. We talked about shift left at various points today, where you're talking about the design phase, but if you really think about implementing it into your governance phase, that influences all of your design approvals and then implementation.
Yeah. I saw another one come through. There was a short-term cost benefit savings are obvious sometimes, but what are some of the longer-term benefits of FinOps? And I think this is an interesting thing that really depends on what agency you're looking at and what some of your mission is. But I think there are numerous kind of capabilities. The long-term tracking and historical data capabilities here are really interesting, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there for clients and others to be able to do trending. There's a lot of really great value in that data long-term, especially as we start talking about cost per mission served, you mentioned earlier, and some of those kind of capabilities. I also think there's really good data that is able to be harvested. We talked earlier too about security and some of those other functionalities. Having that bigger picture, that broader lens can really help kind of suss out some of those anomalies, but also be able to show positive trending over time.
Well, also if you're talking about long-term benefits, as Amanda talked in her forecasting session, when in government you're often forecasting 2 to 4 years in advance, sometimes even longer, those long-term benefits are paying off from what you do now, and you may not have requested the right amount for 4 years from now, but you'll have more and more data as you go through, so you have more time to take corrective action. Any other kind of long-term benefits?
Hitting a little bit more on the trend aspect, we just had some folks finish up year end, right? And it was actually going to be a big question mark. How much surge was going to happen in the cloud due to year end? We now feel much more confident going into next year's year end, what that's going to look like, but also we can then compare it later on and figure out if it is higher next year or lower, what are those drivers? And I think I'm really actually excited to find that out. So,
one thing we didn't mention today, but probably should have been in various sections, is the going back and checking your work, and not a check your math before you present your forecast, but continuing to measure over time how accurate were you. When you put in that estimated cost into your governance process to do something for an approval, making sure that you go back 3 months, 6 months, a year from now and see if you were right, so that you can take those lessons learned into your next request. I had a recent story where we hooked up a new monitoring tool. It surged our data transfer and S3 query costs in an AWS environment. And we immediately caught it, which is great. That's part of what FinOps does. But our long-term benefit there is we know we're going to be attaching another monitoring tool in another probably 3 to 6 months. And we've been able to put corrective action in place for that tool. And we haven't even finished acquiring it yet. So those long-terms come in all sorts of benefits and taking those lessons learned.
Yeah. Derek, I saw in here, what advice would you give to an organization who wants to mature their FinOps journey?
So I think an organization first needs to identify where in their journey they are, and then look at the FinOps framework domains and capabilities, see, okay, these are the ones that are currently applicable to us in our journey, and how they align to the goals of our organization. And then after they've done that, begin to build the framework needed with their stakeholders across the organization and the governance and processes that have to go along with those capabilities and domains so that they have this smooth journey going upwards towards a more mature standpoint.
Yeah, I think there's 4 domains and 22 capabilities. If you try and hit all of those at the same time, you're going to be crawling for a while.
Yeah.
So.
And honestly, not all capabilities matter the most to every entity, right? If you're one person pays your whole bill, charge back, show back isn't a huge driver. Whereas for others, making sure every penny is attributed back out. We heard from Nick with his, multiple institutions and research grants and other funding things. He needs every penny to be able to get charged back, so that's very important to him. But for Shane at Christopher Newport, it's just one bill that they pay.
Yeah. So, I saw another one here about, how technical does someone really need to be to get involved with FinOps? And I'm curious what your perspective on that is.
Yes, I love this question, actually, because, of course, you're going to want to have some cloud foundational knowledge, and of course, if you can, you're a FinOps practitioner, just to get you started. But really, if you don't have those, the whole point of FinOps is cross-team collaboration. So if you are having those conversations with that technical engineer, with that contracting officer, with that cybersecurity person, and you are starting those conversations off, defining things or stopping the conversations as they're happening to say, wait, when you say environment, what do you mean? Because all of those personas might have a very different definition of what an environment is, what a workload is, all of those things.
Or an application.
Yes, and so the great news is if you are actually leveraging cross-team collaboration and communication, you don't have to be that technical.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess let's round out with one last question here. Merritt, what have you found to be some of the best motivators to help change the culture of an organization when it comes to FinOps?
Proof is in the pudding. Any win that you have, if you can share it back in a way that matters to that persona. Had a project once where we knew that there was not going to be anyone working during the holidays, and we were able to stop all non-live environments. Great, did that save money? That was really nice, but giving that data back to them and showing them exactly how much they saved and how that was able to benefit the funding issue that the client was facing, really did change the culture. And within a 2-month period, we went from, do we have to do this? This takes time, to, oh, wait, should we turn this other thing off? And it really was just from showing them the proof of their actions had a positive impact.
Yeah. So with that, I'd love to thank everyone who joined us today, our public sector panelists, our cloud service provider panelists, all of my colleagues here at Deloitte that have made this broadcast possible. But thank you all for joining us today, and we hope you've enjoyed our content.